Guys, there we have it. The 2025 season is officially wrapped. Lando Norris is our world champion, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead. Let's do it for the one final time here in 2025. It's our 2025 Abu Dhabi reaction. Welcome back, guys, for one final time. This will be the last time, well, not the last time you see me before the 2026 season begins in about 3 months, almost exactly. We have to talk about the 2025 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, as well as you'll see a 2025 season-long reaction from me here in a few days. But we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna kick things off with our, weekend quick hits. We'll go over our weekend winners and losers, and then we'll wrap up with our final predictions results for the 2025 season, as well as give our final standings for the community challenge. So let's go ahead, without further ado, go ahead, jump on in this thing, get this thing started with our quick hits. Where else can you start besides the front? Max Verstappen may have won the 2025 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, but it is in fact Lando Norris who takes home his first World Drivers' Championship. Congratulations to him. He ended up coming home third in this one, which was quite literally exactly all he needed to do in this one. He ended up starting on the front row, but ended up finishing in third after teammate Oscar Piastri passed him in the opening laps. And it was all he had to do to take it home. He didn't have to do anything crazy. And even with a charging Charles Leclerc chasing him down there towards the back half of the race, that McLaren perfectly good enough to take this one home, finishing on the podium, but with a championship trophy to go in his suitcase as well. Congratulations to Lando in this one. He was absolutely stellar at, really just living in the moment, not letting the moment get too big, not letting the nerves take over. As we saw down the stretch of this season, it really took nerves of steel to kind of steel himself, take hold of the championship, and ride it out all the way home. We saw him win more than a few races in a row to really grab hold of this one, and he never, ever, ever let it go. There was a couple of iffy moments there, but at the end of the day, it is him who's raising the trophy, him and him alone. So congratulations, Lando, on your 2025 World Drivers' Championship. If we move down one spot on the World Championship ladder, it is Max Verstappen, who ended up falling off of the trophy by just 2 points. Who would have thought that it would have come down to just 2 points separating P1 and P2 in the championship this season, in which I'm sure everyone's reaction was just as similar to mine, thinking back to every single small instance here and there that cost each of these drivers points or even gained them points here and there, just in these small moments that over the course of 24 rounds and 6 sprints really add up. And at the end of the day, I think Max can be extremely proud at the fight that he put up in this one, especially considering he was in a car that I don't think was as good as his driving really made it out to be. And so while it did end up falling short, he ended up having a very solid weekend, obviously taking pole position, and ended up taking the win as well. Unfortunately for him, it just wasn't enough. There was no drivers or cars good enough to really challenge the McLaren and really push Lando. Like I mentioned, Charles did give it his best shot, but at the end of the day, Max did literally everything he could have, but it was always going to take a little bit of luck, and he fell, unfortunately, just short in this one. But he comes away with, I believe, his 71st win in F1 to, for his trouble. So can it really be that bad? All right, let's move on now to P3 in the championship, and incidentally P2 on the road here in Abu Dhabi, Oscar Piastri, who I think might be the, we're gonna save it in our big picture. We'll get there in the next video, I promise. But Oscar Piastri finishes his season with another podium, finishing P2 on the road with a less than ideal strategy, but still good enough to get, P2 here in the season finale. Oscar ends up leading the championship this season for 15 of the 24 rounds, but unfortunately falls just as short in his bid for his first world championship as well. It's unfortunate to say the least, but ultimately I think we can all point to that stretch there in the last, call it 8 races, where he really just, for whatever reason, nerves, whatever it could have been, just really struggled. And it's unfortunate to say the least. I think he himself would probably be the most dejected out of any of us, But at the end of the day, he did just complete only his 3rd season in F1. I think we can all agree he has a bright future ahead of him in this one. Even in this race, you saw him try and pull off a miracle. He started on the hard tires. Lando ended up starting on the mediums in front of him. And so that did not stop Oscar from going around the outside after that second DRS zone on the backside of the circuit to go and take P2 for his own. And it ultimately got him a P2 in this one, but unfortunately it is P3 in the championship. I think he'll probably want to take a couple of weeks off, not think about it, and start gearing up for 2026. It's certainly not a bad way to finish. A 2 podium streak last time out in Qatar, followed by a podium here in Abu Dhabi. Definitely sets himself up pretty well for 2026, but at the same time, I'm sure he'll be the first to tell you that it's a little disappointing. If we wanted to talk about teams that could not wait for this race to be over soon enough, I think Ferrari is a good place to start. You had Lewis Hamilton being knocked out in Q1 in this one, as well as Charles Leclerc, and trying to get the most out of that car as possible. Ultimately coming home in a pretty decent, relatively position. He finished here P4, and I think the Ferrari actually had pretty decent race pace. But at the end of the day, I think the VF25 will not be remembered highly by many Ferrari fans, and I think these drivers will be the first ones to throw it in the bin themselves. Lewis Hamilton ended up making up the positions, finishing in the points, well inside the points actually, and so I think ultimately it was a race pace car that really struggled for qualifying pace over the course of 2025. But Charles Leclerc ended up having a very solid Abu Dhabi. I think he was ultimately showing a lot of really good pace there in that second stint. But unfortunately for him, it really just I think highlighted the difference between the McLaren and the Ferrari, in that while he did show really good pace, it certainly was nowhere close enough to end up making up ground on the McLaren. So Ferrari, I think, will be very happy that this race is finally over. I think as we wrap up Abu Dhabi now at this point, I think we can officially say goodbye to the ground effects era. I think when this era started, 2022 was the first year that I started watching Formula One. So effectively, while I have enjoyed as much F1 history as the internet has allowed me to consume, seeing it only live for the first time since this ground effects era began, I think in the beginning it certainly had a lot of hype around it, but ultimately by the time these cars exit this regulation era, I think not very many of us will remember it fondly. I think in the beginning it was billed as this way for these cars to follow each other more closely, but when it all said and done, teams will always find a way to generate dirty air, make it harder for cars to follow, and I think they pretty much nailed it, because this Abu Dhabi was basically a big snoozer, and I could not think of a better way to say goodbye to the ground effects era than this. And then lastly, let's say goodbye to DRS, our drag reduction system, which has been in this sport for over a decade now, makes its final appearance, at least for now, in Formula One. We got to see a fun fact of the classic Jensen Button being the first person who was able to push the DRS button, to young Kimi Antonelli, who is officially the last person to push the DRS button in Formula One. I think it is an innovation that I think makes a lot of sense. I think it had its good moments, but at the same time, it only kind of promoted more of this, overtaking only on the straights, not really, building cars to necessarily overtake in the corners as much. And so it is going to be missed. So we'll be very interested to see if the MOM system will take over in DRS's place starting in 2026. But I would be remiss to end this quick hit section if not to say goodbye to a long-standing F1 regulation tool, and at the end of the day, one of the big factors in overtaking in Formula One. So DRS, I salute you. Let's go ahead and quickly go over our weekend winners and losers, and you already know where I'm going with this. Our weekend winner is Lando Norris, securing his first world championship in what I believe is his 7th season in Formula One. Who else could it be? He did exactly what he needed to do to secure a title for himself. It is a long season coming, I think, for him. Obviously, Oscar ended up leading a majority of this season, but at the end of the day, he did exactly what he needed to do, culminating in a podium finish here in Abu Dhabi, cementing himself in F1 history as, I believe, the 35th or 36th new F1 champion. not too shabby for a little boy from the UK, securing himself and McLaren their first driver's title in a very, very long time. Let's go ahead and flip this to our weekend losers, and we're going to do a dual loser here because it is our two championship contenders, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri. Obviously, I already covered a little bit of Oscar's disappointment as this season wound down. Max, on the other hand, I think we're calling a loser primarily just because there are a lot of instances this season where you could point to where Max might have been able to secure more points and put himself in better position. But at the end of the day, I think your biggest loser on a championship race Sunday has to be the two or one or however many contenders there are who ultimately do not end up winning the championship. I think another contender for loser this weekend was Ferrari, just based on the wild swings that we saw, as well as probably a few other drivers that you could point to up and down the grid. At the end of the day, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri finished just off the top step of the Drivers' Championship. And ultimately, I think that's going to be, no matter how much they were potentially not challenging at the beginning of the season or even towards the end of the season, it is disappointing when it all is said and done and you're not hoisting the trophy yourselves. All right, let's go ahead and get into our final predictions results for the 2025 season. This will be pretty quick because outside of a couple of instances, I went very crazy in this one. Obviously, I wrapped up my predictions championship last time out in Qatar. So I went absolutely wild, preying on a bit of a wild finish here in Abu Dhabi. Ultimately, I think it was fairly right, but at the end of the day, not enough to get everything correct. But let's go ahead and kick things off with my biggest positive surprise. I went with Yuki Tsunoda, who ultimately finishes his F1 career, or at least his first stint in F1 here outside the points, and a bit of a tough weekend for Yuki. He did ultimately end up making Q3 in qualifying, but given the tact of trying to help out Max Verstappen try and win his championship, ultimately garnered himself a penalty as well as finishing outside the points. So as much as it pains me to say, Yuki, I'm sorry that it had to end this way, but we enjoyed every moment. As we move on now to my pick for biggest disappointment, as I mentioned, I went a little crazy in my predictions and went with Lando Norris to officially fall out of championship contention and lose the championship. And so ultimately, obviously, no points for me here either. He did end up finishing on the podium and winning himself a championship, so certainly not points for me there. But where I did get some points is where I hedged a bit, and that is my qualifying predictions, where I had an Oscar Piastri P3, a Lando Norris P2, and a Max Verstappen P1. That's right, baby. I went 3 for 3 on exact positions in qualifying. Definitely not something that happens all the time, but it's certainly saving me here a little bit as we round out our 2025 predictions campaign on a high note. So we'll take 3 points there and say, thank you very much. As we move on now to my podium predictions, we start with P3, George Russell. No, ultimately, I think this was probably pretty close to coming in, but George had a terrible start and ultimately ended up costing him in the end. Obviously, it was Lando who finished on the podium there in P3. But that said, I did have an Oscar Piastri P2 and a Max Verstappen P1. So another 2 points added onto the total. And then for the actual final time here in 2025, my one crazy prediction was a Max Verstappen wins the 2025 World Championship. I went a little insane, okay? But at the end of the day, Max did everything that he needed to do to secure himself a championship. I also was going to need some luck for this one to come in, and we didn't get it. Things happen, so for the final time, no points in my one crazy prediction. But if we take a look now at our final standings for our predictions championship, we have me, who seals his win with another pretty good weekend, securing 5 points. I finished the season with 88 points total. British TTG officially takes home P2 with 78 points. Settle 40 comes in a close third with 75.5 points. And F1 Inferno's charge there down the back half of this season falls just short to finish on the predictions podium on 74 points. Andrew with 32.5 points, and Spectral rounding things out with 10.5 points. Obviously, Andrew and Spectral have not been in predictions for a while now. But if you are interested in getting in on our predictions championship for 2026, you can find the link down below. Join the Discord. Hop in, and every week leading up to a Grand Prix weekend, we'll make a predictions call, and you'll have your opportunity to make your predictions and hop on the leaderboard and prove that you, in fact, no wheel. We'd love to have you join. It's a lot of fun. The Smack Talk is very fun, as well as we'd love to have more F1 fans join in for 2026. So head on in there, join the Discord, and get involved. But guys, unfortunately, what is next for Formula One? And the answer is about a 3-month hiatus as the F1 season is officially over. We are only about almost 3 months exactly away from the opening round of the 2026 season in Australia. Obviously, we'll have some February testing there in between, but at the end of the day, we don't truly know what's going to happen as we usher in a new engine regulation as well as a new chassis regulation as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. This season was incredible. I could not thank all of you for coming and hanging out and watching and enjoying Formula One all together with these predictions videos, as well as with our reaction videos as well. We'll be back when the season is coming up to start our 2026 campaign ourselves. But before then, stay tuned with my 2025 year in review video is going to come out as well, where we'll be talking about the entirety of the 2025 season, as well as take a look back at our 2025 season predictions and see just how well or wrong we really were. But guys, I could not thank you guys enough for joining me on this 2025 adventure. I cannot wait for 2026 to roll around. But for the final time here in our season recap, I will sign off once again. I can't believe the season's over. But guys, until the next one, I'll see you in the next one.